Okay, we are ready to go.
Evening, everyone. I'm calling our meeting to order November 9th, 2022 at 6:04 p.m. Agenda item number 2, roll call. John, would you run us through roll call, please?
Absolutely, my pleasure. Committee member Cliff Bryant.
Here.
Susie Merhauer.
Here.
Thank you. Regina Sakels.
Here.
Tutu Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Don Whitebread.
Here.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Shu
Here.
and Chair Jesse Cup is currently not here. Okay. Your next item.
Sure. Agenda
And,
item number 3. Oh, I see
Jesse
Jesse
just
starting to
arrived.
connect. Yep.
Jesse.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jesse, we just went through roll call.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for
Yeah,
starting.
Tony was starting to flex her power here, so it's a good thing you came in.
That's funny. Yeah, I was about to get power hungry, Jesse. I was about to get power hungry, so you came just in time. Sorry. Yeah, we were at agenda item 3, minutes approval. Do you want to take it from there?
Let's see. Can you read that one out while I open the agenda? And then.
Oh yeah, sure. Agenda item 3, minutes approval. Minutes for the October 12th, 2022 meeting have been delivered to committee members and posted on the City Hall bulletin board. Does anyone have any corrections or additions? If not, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I did want to note we do have 2 members of the public on the call, so we should pause for public comment before taking any action, assuming there's no questions.
Okay. Sorry, but were there any corrections or additions on the minutes? Nope. Any comments or questions from the public?
Members of the public, if you wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand or hit *6. I do have someone wishing to speak. Naya, I'm going to allow you to speak.
Hello. I've never been to one of these meetings before, but I'm a Los Altos resident, but have lived in Mountain View and went to school there too. I don't know if this is the right moment to ask this, but I just wanted to introduce myself as a local artist and get a future project on your radar that I've been thinking about.
So can we, I'll unmute you when we go to oral communications from the public. This is right now on the minutes.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
we'll come back to at oral communications from the public.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Naya. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, let's see. Committee member Bryant.
Yes.
Committee member Sakels.
Yes.
Committee member Merhauer.
Yes.
Committee member Thompson.
Yes.
Committee member Whitebread.
Yes.
Vice Chair Shu
Yes.
and Chair Cup.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Jesse, you good, or do you still need some time to set? Okay.
Oh, I can take over now. Thank you, Tony. And looks like we're going into item 4, oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. So now's your chance, Naya, and anybody else who has something they want to say to the committee.
We have 2 members. I'm going to first unmute Naya, and then I will unmute Bruce. So should be able to speak now, Naya.
Okay, sure. So again, I'm not exactly sure how public art committee works and things like that, but I'm interested in learning more about how the committee works and about how public art happens in Mountain View. But so I mentioned I'm from Mountain View, Los Altos area. I graduated from Mountain View High School in 2019, so 3-4 years ago or something like that at this point. And I'm a current student in Rhode Island, studying art as well as history. So yeah, but interested in public art, learning about public art, and making public art at some point. So I guess I just wanted to get on your radar that somewhere down the line, I do have an idea for a project that I'm working on currently, working on making a model for that project. And what the project is at its stage right now is it's kind of a response to the El Camino bells that are arranged throughout California, and how, there hasn't been that much talk about the bells, but because they're kind of innocuous, but they, I feel like, fit into kind of this broader conversation that people have been having about monuments and what are we honoring. And the bells obviously kind of commemorate the journey of the Spanish missionaries as they colonized California and built missions where indigenous people were forced to labor, and many died and had their ways of life destroyed. So not a very pretty history, but the bells kind of commemorate that. So my idea kind of with this project is to make a piece, which I have photos and things of, which I could send to the committee later, that takes on like these, kind of plays with the idea of a toppled monument, but without actually toppling the monument. So a piece that would go, in this case, near perhaps like the bell in downtown on Castro, and kind of make a dialogue in the space between those pieces. So yeah, just wanted to let you know I'm thinking of a piece somewhere down the line, whether that's many, many years from now or, a couple of years from now. And also just wanted to introduce myself because I do hope to learn more about public art and how public art happens in the city. So yeah, I think that's about all I got for now.
All right, thank you, Naya.
Just real quickly, Naya, so the committee can't respond to your public comment at this point in time, but I would say I'm going to read out my email to you. Please email me and I'll give you some background on this, and I'm happy to answer your questions. So it is my first name, John, JOHN .Lang, that's LANG at mountainview.gov. So john.lang at mountainview.gov. Feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer your questions. And the next speaker we have is Bruce Englund. Give me a minute, Bruce.
There we go. Hear me now? Thanks,
There you
John. Yeah, Naya, you might be interested in hanging around to hear the upcoming agenda items. I'm going to talk about something there that might be intriguing to you. And I also have some thoughts about your project. I won't take time now to talk about it, but if you'd like to have a conversation, I'd love to talk with you about it. And either John or Jesse can help put you in touch if you're interested in doing that. So that's that. And then what I wanted to tell you is on the PDF, in the PDF for the meeting, I found it difficult to use the code. The code's not embedded in the Zoom link. Now, I think this might be something more for Heather, but whether there's a template for the agenda files, I don't know, but they're not consistent across the bodies. Sometimes you can click on the link and it takes you directly to the meeting, and sometimes you have to manually type in the code. So if you're walking dogs and you're carrying your cell phone, which is what was happening to me today with the ZA meeting, I couldn't connect with the meeting. It was impossible. So I know you can't answer questions, but I'm going to assume that I should take that up with Heather and see where maybe we can go with that.
I've raised it with document processing, Bruce, and I'll work on getting it resolved. So thank you.
Okay, for me, is it okay for me to work with Heather because I don't have that cross connection? Okay, thanks, John.
Absolutely. Any other members wishing to speak?
Yeah, I see someone new from the public has joined. I let Gil on. So if you want to speak on any non-agendized items, now would be the time to do it. Okay, if we don't have any hands raised, no buttons pressed on the phone to speak, then I guess we can move on. And the next agenda item is item 5, upcoming agenda topics. This portion of the agenda is reserved for the identification of agenda items for future meetings. Okay. Placemaking. Do you want to read this out, John? I don't know if should I just say the bullet points, or I don't know if you want to go a little more in depth on these, or
I wanted to go a little more in depth if you
Okay.
don't mind, Chair. These are items, obviously, the committees identified as well as staff. So as far as upcoming items, one key item that was brought up, and I'm working with our public work teammates on trying to bring forward a more comprehensive approach, is all the elements associated with downtown and as it relates to public improvements. So there's the grade separation, there is the pedestrian mall, there's some other CIP projects. So how to come about that, approach that in a more holistic way. So that is a future agenda topic. One of the recurring topics is public art strategy. We're not talking specifically about it this evening. I will be bringing back more information in December on this next iteration for you, but don't have it for you this evening. Wanted to just briefly touch on this since Bruce is on the call. I did have an opportunity. Bruce had flagged this for the committee 2 committees ago. I had a conversation with him regarding art placement, landscaping, integration, and how to further explore that. I am looking into the biodiversity plan that is being made, and there's a tie-in there after talking with Bruce. So looking to work with Bruce to bring this back as a more deeper conversation to the committee. K-5 augmentation, this will be impacted or will be addressed through some of the public art strategy elements that are being vetted. And then wanted to draw your attention to 2 other items. One is the interest in doing a joint committee meeting with the downtown committee again. And then the last one, which is not on your list, is the grade separation project for downtown. That will be possibly coming to you as early as December. If not, it will be at your February meeting. So that project is starting to move a little bit faster, and we'll be needing to do a call for artists sooner versus later. So either at the December or February meeting, we will be bringing that topic to the committee's consideration. Those are the topics I have as the running list. Happy to entertain other suggestions from members of the committee at this point in time.
So this Cliff, one topic I like to, that I mentioned last meeting, was kind of re-looking at our process for selecting public art that goes into a public park and how that ties in with the art. Can we tie it more closely with the selection of the play equipment that is chosen, and how those processes all work together?
That will be actually discussed under 6.2, Cliff. Sorry, it's not as titled, maybe as discreetly as you mentioned, but that is one of the elements. We'll touch on at 6.2.
We're good, thanks.
I don't have any new items, but I just want to make a remark. I'm very happy to hear, John, that we're going to work on a comprehensive approach towards the pedestrian mall. I looked at that functional plan and I saw that like the common areas that they identify, that they do identify art exhibits or art, have art placement there. So I'm very much hoping we can get involved in that.
Okay.
And then the other thing, definitely the art. I hope we can talk about the public art strategy more, especially about the initiatives and how that all ties in and what processes and funding will work. Yeah, looking forward to that.
I wonder if, as part of the discuss how art placement and landscaping integration can be further explored. Maybe we could also talk about public art integrating with bike lanes, bike paths, pedestrian or protected bike lanes, things like that. But I don't know if that would be a separate bullet point or could possibly be merged with something else.
I believe that's, I've got that more flagged under the K5 augmentation because
Okay.
currently K5 limits the types of CIP projects.
Yeah.
And this is, you're talking about a different type of CIP project that's not currently addressed as a public art opportunity under the K5.
Great. Yeah, because I know that, yeah, it's not currently covered by K5, but I spoke to city council and they made an exception. They're piloting it for the bike lane. I believe they voted and approved that there's going to be some public art in the protected bike lane that's going down California. So we're going to have an opportunity to work on that in the future and hopefully do a good integration and impress them and the citizens of Mountain View. So yeah, I don't really have anything else to add. I think we're in really, really good hands with John. Even though Tiffany's not here anymore, I think we got a great staff member who we can trust to keep things going in the right direction. So thanks, John.
Thank you for the comments. If there's no other feedback from the committee, I would suggest maybe open up for public comment.
Yes, let's do that. Any public commentary?
I'm not seeing any hands raised by our attendees.
Okay. Last chance, committee members. You have any comments? Okay. We'll go on to item 6, unfinished business, 6.1 capital improvement program, CIP, public art project updates. Staff will provide updates on Reinsdorf Park Aquatic Center, CIP project 1838, Fayette Park, CIP project 2048, and Reinsdorf Park maintenance and tennis building, CIP project 2148.
Not a lot has changed since the last meeting, so this will be a very quick update for the committee on the Aquatic Center. Once again, the project is still very much on track to open fall 2023. It's a little over 25% complete. The one thing we are still continuing to work through is insurance requirements on a contract. So 2 of the 3 contracts have been executed. We are still trying to finalize the last contract on that and hopefully get that ball rolling there. On Fayette Park, construction just commenced. There is no other immediate update at this point in time. And on the Reinsdorf Park maintenance and tennis buildings, design is near completion now, and we do anticipate construction bid going out here at the end of the year. And I continue to work with artists once again, working through insurance requirements on contracts, and hopefully getting those executed so both of our mural artists are able to paint the murals as envisioned. And then to that point, once those agreements are in place, we will be able to bring back to this committee the design concepts after both artists had spent some time with the senior and youth advisory committees, and have that come back to this committee to review before moving forward with that project. Those are the 3 CIP project updates at this point in time.
Great. All right. Thank you, John. Have any comments, questions from committee members? Nothing. Okay. Comments, questions from the public? I guess we can't answer if you have a question, but we can listen.
I'm not seeing any hands from members of the public at this point in time.
Okay, so looks like we'll go on to the next agenda item, item 7, new business. 7.1 AB 361 resolution to continue remote public meetings during state of emergency, adopt a resolution of the Visual Arts Committee to the City of Mountain View, authorizing virtual meetings pursuant to AB 361 and making required findings to be read in title only, further reading waives attachment 1 to the committee memorandum. So would anyone like to comment on that before we do another vote?
I would like to just provide a very quick update to committee members. So this will be the last time we'll do this. Minutes before this meeting started and for the good of the public, it appears the clerk has given direction to all the advisory committees that effective February 1, 2023, the advisory committees and city council will be going back in person. I have distributed to the committee a letter from the clerk's office stating that. So there are some instructions if any of the advisory board members wish to review that and have concerns or comments, please follow directions in the letter. But given council will be continuing to extend these 30-day emergency orders at least through February, this will be the last time the committee will do this because we'll just fall under city council. And then effective February 1, all advisory committees will go back to in person along with city council.
Have we tried to approach the city council, give us the big meeting room?
Right now, the plan is if there are not other meeting conflicts, there may be the ability to host in a different room, but as it stands right now, it would be going back to the smaller, I believe it's the atrium room, if I remember
Atrium conference room, yeah.
the name of the conference room correctly.
Yeah.
It would be to be held in that room.
That's right. I thought we were gonna get Rainsdorf Park, Rainsdorf Community Center access and have meetings there. Is that not?
There are some technical challenges with that meeting room. The atrium is actually a hybrid room, would allow for hybrid meetings. Unfortunately, the Rainsdorf Center does not allow for hybrid at the present time.
And the ability of having a hybrid room, since we can't attend remotely, is that only for the benefit of like having an artist call in or something? Okay.
Or members of the public to continue to attend virtually.
I see. Okay. Well, it sounds like that's going to be happening in February, regardless, but we can go on extending our own remote meetings if we want to. So you have any thoughts on that? I'm inclined to just continue as we've been doing it.
For me, it doesn't either way. I go with whatever everybody, I think everybody needs to feel comfortable. So whatever people want to do. I know Cliff is a little, right, Cliff? You are a little more leaning towards keeping Zoom meetings.
Yeah, but if we're going to be now, the state of emergency is ending, basically our coverage is going to be, we're going to have to meet in person. And I glanced at John's message, and having masks and whatnot will seem to be a requirement for especially in a small meeting room, I would think. So things have changed.
Yeah.
But where it's been nice though is that it's been able, people with families and whatnot to participate in these meetings, and it's going to be more difficult for as a result. But
yeah.
So is that, I have not had a chance to read John's email. Is that a mandatory thing, or we have the option to vote? I didn't follow that closely. To vote in like, yeah, is it mandatory?
So that we're just let's kind of separate two things. So one is the action to, so had this email not come about, the action before you would have been, do you want to meet virtually for December? Because it wasn't clear whether council was going to extend that or not, because their delegation ends at the end of this month. So we have this on the agenda as a way to extend that. New direction came out minutes before this meeting, which I provided, which basically says, come February, all of this is going to change and go back to in person. Now, what that tells me is that the council is going to extend through December, through January, and it will end in February. So this committee can take action on this item tonight, and it really doesn't mean anything because it will be covered by council's decision in December to meet virtually. So you're guaranteed to meet virtually in December.
Hmm,
We don't have a meeting in January. So it means
Okay.
in February, the first meeting back would be in person.
Okay.
But you're covered through December. So this now is kind of a moot point.
Okay.
Because we never knew what the signaling would be based
Got it.
on council.
Yeah, I didn't have time to read that email before I just glanced at it, but so voting on this would basically be a waste of our time. But
Oh, okay, I
It's already
understand.
done.
yeah.
Thank
but
you,
we-
John,
I'm
for
curious,
explaining.
built into this, is there a vaccination requirement, anything like that going on?
At the present time, no.
Okay.
Oh, it sounds like John was saying we can provide feedback though, and respond to that email and say, whatever we feel. So,
If you have concerns, please contact the clerk's office.
yeah.
So
Oh, go ahead.
If I understand John correctly, after February, it's mandatory, correct? To go back in person.
Yes, all the advisory bodies are supposed to come back in person is the direction.
I'm a little surprised that it's us committee members are required to be there in person, but then the public still gets the safety and convenience of having a virtual option. So hopefully we can, I don't know, petition for an air purifier or something, at least. Yeah, in any case, I guess provide feedback and we'll see. Maybe things will change if they get feedback. Maybe things will just stay that way. Well, probably just stay that way. But it's worth it to go ahead and say however you feel about that issue. Okay, so then do we have any commentary from the public?
There is no raised hands on this item, so
Okay.
you could take action on this item or choose not to take action on this item because it in
Yeah.
essence is a moot point.
Yeah, it's just gonna take a minute of our time to do a roll call and not accomplish anything. So we're going to 7.2.
Chair,
Jesse,
Yes.
did you do 6.2?
Oh, looks like I scrolled too far. Okay. Yes, thanks for catching that. 6 point.
Somebody pay attention.
Yeah. Public art scale and placement discussion. Staff to provide an update on orientation, scale / massing related to future K-5 public art. Staff will be seeking feedback and direction from the committee regarding approach to future CIP projects.
so as committee member Bryant mentioned in upcoming agenda topics, this was a topic that came up last committee meeting on really trying to understand after seeing Pyramid Park and the deployment of the art, recognizing maybe some things need to change. So I had the chance to talk with my public works teammates on some of these concepts and wanted to report back on some of these issues that were raised based upon the committee's members and just experience with the art now that it's in place and really understanding the scale and proximity. So this is a verbal update for all of you, but would like some direction, but also how we think about implementing K-5 projects going forward and understanding what would be helpful in evaluating art, placement of art for future consideration. So this is, what I consider a lesson learned, and how do we kind of move forward with a new process or an augmentation to the process going forward. So with that said, I wanted to throw out a couple things for the committee. So one of the concepts that was raised by committee members when we had this discussion, or as a kind of informal discussion on this, was could 3D modeling be used to understand the placement of the art relative to other elements of a park? That is a possibility, depending on the scope and size of the project. So typically larger projects just out of size will typically have 3D modeling associated with that. And that is something that can be brought and incorporated when reviewing larger projects. Much smaller scale projects, that is an additional burden on the project and most likely would not be able to accommodate any type of 3D modeling or simulation. But for larger projects, it has been done and can be done. And that's typically part of a public works scope, depending on the size of the project. So that may be a tool that can be used by the VAC when evaluating context. The other thing that was mentioned by public work teammates is really trying to understand scale. So in the future, when we talk about, say, sculptures or elements of public art, really trying to do some comparisons so there is a true understanding of scale. When you say 6 feet, what does that really mean, look like? We all have, I think, different visions of what 6 feet is. And sometimes when you're standing there, it's like, oh, that's 6 feet. I thought that was smaller, or I thought it was taller. So as part of talking about projects, we'll start to use some better comparisons so people understand the scale and magnitude. The other suggestion was, as part of the review process, all committee members are certainly invited and encouraged to visit the site, but maybe as a process going forward for evaluating art, that the committee goes out together, finding some mutual time, and actually walk the site with the public works team and understand the location or potential locations, and spend some time out there understanding the site and where the art may live in the future. So we can do that as a voluntary thing, or we can do that as a group. I certainly invite the committee to provide feedback on that. And then the last piece really had to do with some of the other equipment and using the park example, the playground equipment. So one of the lessons learned from this last project was most of the playground equipment had already been sourced and procured. So making sure that that information is also conveyed from a color palette, from a look and feel. So as these projects go forward, typically playground structures are actually already either completely designed or already in the process of procurement. And so bringing those elements into the conversation as it relates to art. So the typical construction process doesn't have to rejigger. We just need to make sure we're capturing that information. So when art comes up as it relates to a particular project, we have those elements, or the VAC has those elements, I should say, as part of consideration on art pieces. The last comment I wanted to provide the VAC was it had to do with, in essence, the placement of art and one of the pieces on the art piece. And this can certainly be open for discussion, but what I heard from committee members is one of the art pieces, it was either a butterfly or a bee, seemed to be placed very low on the art piece and was not strategically seen. Now, the feedback received on that comment was sometimes that's the artist's decision, and recognizing where is it kind of the artist's decision versus the VAC's desire, and understanding that. So I think having a conversation with an artist on, can on-site modifications be done? Did the artist really intend to have it be strategically on that, placed in that specific location, say on a scale of between 1 and 5 feet, instead of being at the 2 foot level, could it be moved up to the 4 foot level, something to that degree? That typically is an artist representation, but there are things maybe the VAC wants to consider as part of the approval art, really understanding the orientation of the art, and once again, kind of the scale. Public Works did share with me that, you know, artists do have some ability to augment. So if they get on site and they choose to augment the piece up a little bit or down, if it's an added element, they generally can do that without a lot of to do, if you will. Some other pieces are a little more difficult to modify on site. So that is something to think about of when an art piece is picked or reviewed, understanding how it's sited on that site and whether something should be at the 2-foot level versus maybe the 4-foot level for greater visibility. But once again, I think that is a conversation the VAC should have with an artist as part of reviewing the art. And then it might be worthwhile also as part of the process of picking the art that both the artist and the VAC truly understand the orientation of the art in that location. So when a decision is being made about a particular piece, that it's clear the orientation of it and how it will be facing, and having some clarity around that. So I think those are all things that is part of the call for artists and that discussion and review that the VAC does around art. Those are conversations that I think are worthy of having and can be augmented. So there's a better sense that the scale, the massing, and the feel of the piece makes sense or is complementary to the other elements of the project. So that's my verbal update that I wanted to share with the committee. I would love for the committee's feedback, sense, how much more process do you want to build into review of a K-5 project like that? What elements would be helpful? Recognizing we could signal right away in the call for artists, these are the things we want, versus where do we get into picking the art piece and making sure it's clear there's a balance between artist vision and VAC. So I'll turn it over to the committee for questions, and then certainly invite the public to respond to this as well or provide comment as well.
So John, if I could just pick up one of your comments. You said, I understood that when it comes to our committee to start the selection process for a piece to go into the to a park, that the staff, Public Works, has already selected the play equipment that's known. So that could be presented to us as part of this is the park environment that the piece will go into, which we can also then share with the artists when we do a call, so that they can see that as well. Did I answer that right?
And what was shared with me in many cases, that is the case, that the actual the play equipment or park equipment is either already been decided upon or is in the process being procured. So there should be some details about the look, the feel, the size of that piece that could help inform the VAC.
And then I just want to build on that's wonderful to hear, because I think that would help me, and I think it would help. I would think it would help the visual artists whose piece are going to go into that environment to know how their piece will interact with the wonderful play equipment that's being put into the parks. But I just want to build off of one little bit of that. Is I recall from the city processes with designing park equipment or selecting park equipment, that's done with the participation of the residents in that park. Assuming like in Pyramid Park residents. So can we also then, so the city's made contact with those residents, they've talked to them, they've gotten their feedback, etc., in order to select the play equipment. Can we then build on that and incorporate those public members into selection of the public art piece that'll go into their park? In other words, invite them to see the pieces that are being discussed and invite them to give comments to us, because we have had links already established with them. That way they can participate. They can get a sense that we're selecting a piece for the park that they're helping to design, and it's kind of a win-win for everybody. Is that a possibility can you explore that a little bit more and later?
Happy to explore it. I need to kind of understand the parks process a little
Sure.
bit better.
Yeah.
But how the VAC can engage with that already identified group, happy to look into it and explore that as a next step in understanding how the VAC may augment their process going
Right.
forward with public art. So happy to look into that.
Thanks. That's very
I
good
think-
news, though. Thanks, John.
I think traditionally, our purpose has always been to, represent the public, represent the neighborhood, just to streamline the process so we don't have, 25 cooks. And so it might even be simpler to just meet ahead of time with some of these people who are already connected in the neighborhood and say, hey, what do you got anything in mind? When we're selecting, because otherwise, God, I don't know how we do it. It's a great idea, but the mechanics of it sound complicated and time consuming.
So once again, not fully understanding the parks review process, but let me start with that and look into how that's done. As maybe part of identifying those pieces, there's another question that could be asked. So it's a twofer. So it's not having to your point, Don, recreate it, but how do we capture it at that point in time? That may help inform the call for artists, right? So it looks like members of the community want this kind of play equipment, what have you, and maybe there's a type of a question about what would you envision in art in this community as part of that process, and that gets funneled over to this side and used as used in the call for artists process, and kind of do a twofer at that point in time. But I need to better understand the process. So I think I understand your sentiment.
Yeah, maybe we can just do it all at one time. That'd be great to get some input like that. Oh, and as far as the learning what kind of playground equipment, I mean, more information is always better. And then whatever's appropriate, I'm sure more information going out to the artists is always better. So all of this is good news, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's going to help get better quality art. So I think it was Cliff who led the charge on that one, said we should get some more information. That turns out they had it all along, so that's great. As for going off and visiting the site and walking it physically, I think that's a great idea too. I would like to do it as a group, and understand not everyone will be able to make it at whatever time, maybe works for the majority, and hopefully people who can't make it will just be able to go on their own time and voluntarily take a stroll. But I can see how that would help too, just getting a sense of the park, even if it's, not constructed yet. If it's a patch of dirt, you can still see what's directly adjacent. You can see the roads and the trees just outside the border, or if there's housing there or what, and that can help influence the decision. So does everyone think we should do it as a group?
Yeah, I think that if we can, I think that would make sense. I mean, you can see also the context of the space then,
Mhm.
Is there Brown Act issues, John, if we all meet together?
There are, but I think that's a very solvable solution. So if there's an
Excellent.
agreeable time, or, we just need to notice it as such and state exactly what is happening. So if we were to say, we're going to visit Mora Park on Tuesday at 11 a.m. to discuss public art in the park, placement, location, etc., or review site location, but we can certainly notice it as a meeting.
So then
And
the
I
public
think
can
so.
show up.
So I think we
Staff
could
would have to
certainly
do.
address the issue. I think that's a easier thing to solve candidly.
Okay. Great. Yeah, I was a little worried about that too, but
What about lunch afterward?
Probably as long as we don't talk about the park or anything in it.
yeah. Talking about the weather or something. So, okay. So should we make a specific motion to recommend that? Or are you okay with just getting this feedback as we've discussed it?
I'm okay with the feedback. If there's nothing else, I certainly
Well, I
welcome.
have something else. I was thinking about your last suggestion about how the artist and the committee would communicate about the location, the rotation, the height, etc. I think that's maybe like build a standard checklist. Like when we approve art, when we communicate art, just have a standard checklist. Item A, color. Item B, size. Item C, material. Item D, rotation. Like have a standard checklist. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to give the direction to the artist on everything. If we say, hey, our artist has the freedom to choose, then we note that the item we don't care, artist has the freedom to choose. But then if we do, like the one we just talked about, the facing on the B and what's not, then if we had a chance to discuss it, the height and the rotation on that little checklist. So at least we have something to reference, and we wouldn't forget about considering it when we go over with the artist. It's just simple checklist.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering actually if we all do all this, have checklists and have all this extra information, that will probably mean, in my opinion, that we have to change our selection process slightly as well, in the sense of that we probably should pre-select a larger pool and then narrow down, just so that we can apply all that extra information, and that we don't influence the artist beforehand, that they submit as they did before, but then once we have we pick our top 10 or so, and we have only 1 or 2 that we can ultimately pick, that we can then apply our information and get back to the artists if we needed. That would make it more manageable. Then get back to the artists that we had pre-selected already and talk about dimensions or placement or size, could renegotiate if the bench that they were suggesting we feel is way too small. If we could get back to them and say, we love your bench, but it should be bigger, would this still be within the scope? And kind of have that dialogue. But yeah, the narrowed down group would probably be one way to do it.
So are you mostly suggesting just that we have a larger pool of finalists, kind of like instead of top 3, top 10, depending on if we have enough applications?
We have to see what's going to happen, right? But I could see that be one way how we can actually fine tune, because we have additional information and additional requirements, that we have a slightly larger pool, and then we have this extra step of actually checking if the art that we favor the most, if it will work or not. Yeah, I would say.
Well, I think if looking at the plans and looking at the new information that we hopefully have, if we can say, this is really no location, this is not going to be a good place for anything tall and skinny. We're looking for benches, whatever, then we can do that. If we get too specific about it, we're ruling out the chance that one of our very creative artists is going to think of something that we never have. And they might come up with something that we say, oh, wait, we never thought of that, but that actually fits just fine. So I think we need to let them roll a bit too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not give too stringent requirements and the call for artists. That's not what I mean. Like, that should be completely open. But then once we have our finalists, that we
that's what I
get
meant
into
as
a
well.
conversation with them if size or anything orientation is we feel like we have to.
That's what I was
Um,
saying. After we have the top 3, then we go detail on the orientation and material. That's after we picked out our top
Yeah.
3.
And
Yeah,
all I'm saying
guess
is
how is
maybe
this-
pick a larger group, slightly larger group, so that we have a bit more, so like bigger selection.
So how we did Rankstorf Aquatics, Susie, is that was that kind of what you're referring to, like an RFQ?
Yeah, I guess,
and
yeah, exactly. That was
Okay.
our biggest project so far. And that's, there we were kind of forced to do that. Yeah, exactly. I think
I would
that's
just,
probably a
yeah.
good process.
I mean, I really like that process, but I would say that if we decide to implement that process across more projects, we have to be sure to be able to provide that stipend for for the finalists, because I think
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is, you know, we want to be able. Sorry, I'm trying to strike the balance of my words because I hear what Don's saying as well. But we want some room and some opportunity to work with the individual artists, and then we're not only asking for their time, right, and their commitment, but we're also asking for them to essentially create sorry, oh gosh, I have
To
such
like
a long brain
revise their
these days.
proposals.
Yes, I mean, yes, but I think you
More
all get it, right?
revisions, more rough
But
drafts.
yeah, I just
yeah.
want to be super conscious of, you know, that multi-step process requires a lot of time and effort from artists, and so we
Mhm.
should be able to compensate them for their for their proposals.
Yeah, I think it's important if we expect more back and forth, we expect more work from them, more revisions, we should
Yeah.
definitely give them a stipend.
Yeah,
I'm
and I mean, I
hopeful that-
love that process, but again, if that's something we want to do more, so if we want to do that more often for our projects, again, I think that's just really important that we got to pay them for that.
And I'm hopeful that when we provide more information about the environment, the play equipment, the colors, the blah, 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 that they also have a better concept of what the environment is that they're going to have a piece sit in, so that information up front will make their selection or their creation much better for us.
Right. Help them
Yeah,
to
we
make it
can trust them to
informed
make good
design
choices.
decision.
yeah.
May I ask the committee, so I appreciate all the feedback. Just a little bit of a clarifying, if I'm kind of following the thread amongst the members, it seems to me maybe there's a threshold requirement. Because I think for a park that is extremely small, where you're talking, it just minimally triggers a CIP project where it might just be benches.
Yeah,
This iterative process seems a little, and I think committee member Whitebread was kind of on to this, like that may be overkill for that thing, but a much larger project that has the opportunity for multiple art pieces, or is just much bigger in scope and size and scale.
Yeah.
This iterative process where there's this additional step to kind of really flesh out what the art could look like.
Mhm.
And feel, you know, really understand it. I think that makes sense for, you know, a little, you know, less than a quarter acre park that is going to have one art piece for, you know, $15,000. You know, do you want to go through that level of iteration? So maybe there is a little bit of a threshold determining of when, you know, process A, process B being a little more iterative, where it's stipend, but something that, you know, is just kind of barely triggering the CIP process, that is not going to allow for a lot of art. It can be a much more straightforward process. So maybe that's a little bit of that fine point, I think, that I'm kind of picking up between the comments. I just want to see if I'm tracking that correctly.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
think that
and I
makes
think
sense.
we actually talked about that. I think
Mhm.
I don't know how long ago it was, John, but I think in one of our previous meetings, we did establish a threshold of when we would use an RFQ process versus just kind of a straightforward call. So I want to say it's 100K, but I don't remember. I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
But so I think that is something we did talk about and land on.
Yeah, makes sense. And like going back to that issue of like, if it just barely triggers the threshold and it's like, you know, we have $20,000 to spend on this bench. Do we really want to spend 1,500 on stipends for three
Right.
different artists to give us their little
But
maquette?
we can probably just, use good judgment.
Yes, we can for that
As
level.
it comes
So,
up, say, okay, this is one that applies here.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and we've been doing that and it's been fine. For big projects, it probably makes sense to do a little more in depth. But I'm thinking if there's a threshold, the threshold should probably apply per piece and not for the total amount of the CIP project. Because if it's a $150,000 CIP project, let's say it's a huge one, a lot of times we split that up into multiple smaller art pieces. And then some of those, it might make sense to have the more iterative process, and some of them it might not if they're smaller pieces.
And where I'm coming from is, I'm going to take Mora Park as an example, which is a small little thing. But as I recall, when we reviewed the pieces that were offered by the artist, the colors that she had on her benches were these pastel blues and grays, etc., which I never had any context of how that would fit into the park. So when I saw the fabulous design of the play equipment with the bursting greens and yellows and reds, I was really thrilled to see that the artist had, through magic, created pieces with mosaics which were matched those colors, those vibrant colors, which I don't know how she did it. The happenstance or whatnot, or the gift of inspiration, but it matched perfectly with the end result. Did not match what I remember seeing. And again, that whole disconnect would have been addressed if she probably had seen, and we had seen, what the color schemes were going to be like. And so that small little piece would have triggered, hey, it should be fit into this environment. And we wouldn't have to, again, spend that much money on it, but it would have just have directed her in the choice of the color schemes to match and remove the surprise. I'm glad it all worked out for Mora, because I thought that was just great.
Are there comments from committee members on this topic of feedback? So as we approach the next kind of iterations of CIP, we have a little different mindset and approach for our figuring out what is the art, what should it look like, and how should it complement the actual CIP project.
Yeah, should we put it off to a future meeting to decide what exactly that threshold is and have a discussion about that? I think it might be helpful if we could go back historically and look at which pieces have we done that for and how much did those pieces cost? And that would probably give us an idea of just what have we previously thought, even though we didn't have a hard and fast rule, which dollar amounts have we generally decided in the past, like, oh yeah, that needs extra, back and forth, extra effort from both the committee and the artist to get it right.
Jesse, I feel like that, like you said, there's no hard and fast rules. I think it depends on the art as well. If it's a bench, as long as you can sit on it, who cares which exactly orientation is, you know what I mean? But if it were like a mobile, like, sticking up mobile, then you do care like how high it hangs. So even though they both might be a $15,000 piece, but then we care, the level we care is different.
It might be, but I think it's just going to complicate things too much to try and categorize it that way by art type. And I think by doing it by
So
makes more sense.
I was saying, like, if we can have the freedom to go by, like earlier I was proposing, we have a checklist. If it's something we need to care, then we say, hey, it needs to be this and that. If we don't need to care, we say, hey, we don't care, go for it. On the checklist.
I think if
like
we
the
know
color.
ahead of time that we're going to care, we should put it in the call and not have people submitting things that won't even,
When you put in
Yeah.
a call, you don't know what you're calling for. It's only after you pick out, oh, this time we picked the bench, so we don't care orientation. Oh, but that time we picked the mobile, we do care. It needs to be 5 foot tall. We
The
need to
thing
be
is,
10
I
foot
do
tall.
care about the bench, right? I think
Okay.
if it's a $65,000 bench, I think it's
Yeah.
worth spending some of that money on a stipend and making sure it's perfect. But if it's a $20,000 bench, then I'm like, okay, well, look at these top 3 proposals, and that one's
So right
great.
now you're trying to you're trying to work out a tier system. At which level will we care enough to say something? What I'm saying is just if we have just a list, then we can decide it on the go. We can just when we see the piece, we can say, oh, this one we want to care, or this one we don't want to care, or this one we care. What part of it we want to care? The orientation or the height, or at that point we can check that list with. So
I have a
But
question.
I think what oh, sorry, Susie, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question regarding that since I'm not on the committee for that long yet. As I understand it, that it happened in the past that I understand that for larger projects, we got to see we asked them for basically a model, what they're actually going to do, right? And the smaller project, we only see the portfolio and we don't really know what the artist's going to propose more or less. But what I understand is that in the past, it has happened that once that proposal has been made, that the committee had weighed in on, like, I remember, I think the Wyandotte Park bench, that the committee wanted some structure on the bench, like wood grain structure or something like that. Like, I'm asking that because I'm
That was the
wondering, like,
finish.
if there's different points of contact, like if do we, once the artist has like submitted their final design, is that the time we should weigh in if we have like site requirements that we wanted to discuss with the artist, or not? Because I'm assuming that has happened in the past, that the committee has seen the final art piece and has weighed in one way or the other.
I guess we can there's always the opportunity to say, hey, can you change this or that slightly, and have a little back and forth. I think in the case of that bench you mentioned, it was a pretty minor change. We weren't asking them to redesign it or submit a new proposal. It was just a discussion of how was the wood finished to protect it from the elements. And the artist was flexible with that and saying, hey, I could do this or I could do that. What do you think? So we just, gave our input on that. But that's different from saying, making major changes to the bench.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just wondering where those points of contact are, so that we can decide, like, what do we put in the call for artists? What do we then pay a stipend because we want to see more beforehand? Do we not? And once we see the final draft, is that another point of contact with the artist that happens naturally, that we could ask about site requirements, and then the final design, right? And maybe last minute corrections. That would be the last point of contact. And I'm just wondering if we should look at it that way.
But I think that's where the threshold is. That
Yeah.
threshold is going to tell us, right? Because to your point, like, the threshold will tell us if it's going to be a multi-step process, and then that will inform the artists, again, what commitment and what is going to be involved on their part. But also it tells us, right? It'll tell us when our reviews are, when we will send them or share our feedback, and how we will be able to work with them. I think if we don't set that threshold in advance and we just keep it open, we are unprepared, right? For kind of, we don't really know how much input we can provide and where to your point of the points of contact are. But I think, again, the threshold will tell us the process and the involvement, the level of involvement from both the artist and the committee. So I think that's why it's super important to have, because, again, I think we need that to tell us what type of call it's going to be.
So may I offer, just once again, making sure I'm kind of synthesizing what I'm hearing. So one, to the earlier comment from Chair Cup, I don't know the dollar threshold of those. I'll have to research that. So I'm happy to come back to the committee and say, when in the past, you've kind of done this other process where it's modeling, this is the level for those art pieces, where this is kind of triggered. So not doing it on the totality of the project, but the individual art pieces are kind of triggering in this dollar threshold. So you have that as a way to kind of decide what might be a threshold. I think what I've heard from the vice chair, and if I may expand upon the comment, I think whenever we can provide more clarity in the process for you, but also for artists is better. So making clear upfront, and I would say one of the things I'm learning in this process, is very new to this process, is we need to make very clear with artists, there's insurance requirements. Do not gloss over this, because it is very problematic to go through this whole process with all of you, and we get to a contract and we can't execute a contract because of insurance. And there's no reason insurance should be wagging the dog when we put up front, this is what you committed to. And when council approves this, it's basically, the only way to change it is to go back to council. So the more we can be upfront and clear, I think, with artists about what the process is going to be, here's the amount of information we have at that point in time, I think that'll make the committee's life a little bit easier as it evaluates, and as people self-select, do I want to bid on this or not? But the more clarity we can provide, I think will not only help the VAC in your decision-making process, but it creates a very clear process. So you don't have to worry about, we're not going to entertain this element because we know it's triggered this threshold. So we're going to go down this path, and everyone's clear about that. So I think there is a lot of value in doing that. I'm happy to come back to the committee with what has been done in the past, kind of what those dollar thresholds are. And maybe the committee can decide, here's a range. If it's going to fit in this range, it's path B, any and all times. Otherwise, we're going to do path A, and we can even do a little off ramp that says it's path A with this one exception, where we may want to retool it because of the uniqueness of this project. But at least there's some clarity both for the committee and for artists that want to respond to the call.
Yeah, the clarity is important. I think that artist needs to know upfront when they are filling out the application, or before they fill out the application, they need to know, is there going to be a stipend if I become a top 3 finalist? Am I expected to do more work if I'm a finalist? Or, is this just a project where I submit my proposal and it's either approved or it doesn't make the cut, and my proposal will basically be the final project? They should know that.
Okay, other feedback? Otherwise, I know we have a member of the public would like, a member of the public that would like to comment.
Oh, yeah, let's go to public commentary.
All right. Alette, I believe it's Alette. You should be able to speak.
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of trying to, I've been just before in meetings and I'm trying to catch up and I understand, but I and kind of understand the process. And I wonder if you have like any kind of a 3D visualization to be able to kind of visualize how a 3D art will look in the environment that you are looking for. Do you have any tool that you can use to help you understand better the proportion and how would it look like?
So as part of the public comment, the VAC really can't respond to the comment. I can make some comments, but do you have other comments or questions that, at this point in time?
No, I would just listen and try to understand better and think about it. I mean, I know I just, it's a question, but I can tell you for myself, I'm using a very basic thing. If I want to put exhibition, I kind of create a room for that I can look 3D and to see put together before I'm going to a place and try to do all the work and try to be there. So I would kind of think that would be some tool for you to help you. I think it's still between I'm not sure about the process. If you ask the artist upfront to show you some kind of model, or you just offer them to do something in a, so I don't understand exactly the process, but I think in one point it would be maybe something to think about how to visualize. I mean, it's important to go to the place and see the place, but I think it would be nice if there would be any additional tool to help you visualize how to integrate a piece of art to the environment. And that's all my comment.
Thank you for the feedback and comments.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just, while the comments, the committee is not for our public, the committee is not able to answer the question, but I did start the conversation by saying, as part of CIP projects, there are going to be some projects that the city will actually get a 3D model for, and that could be a tool for the VAC to use in understanding location, scale for a future public art. Haven't ever talked about the idea of an artist using SketchUp and doing 3D modeling, but from a CIP process, there are going to be some projects just due to the scale and size that 3D modeling would be made available to the VAC as part of this process of identifying public art, but it won't be for all projects. So if there are no other comments from the committee, I certainly have gotten a lot of feedback. And the big takeaway is I'll do some homework on understanding the thresholds where the other alternative path has been done and what those dollar figures are. Happy to come back to the committee and socialize that with the committee. So you may pick a range, dollar range that you would want to trigger this additional review or stipend process, and use that as the approach going forward. And the rest of the feedback is very helpful, and we can build that into kind of a defined approach the committee can take for future CIP projects. So I'll write those notes up and hopefully be reflective of all the comments I heard from the VAC. So if there's nothing else, I think I've captured I think I understand the feedback and I appreciate the feedback.
John, maybe if you could find out, at what point does the city get like the final draft, final submittal, what the artwork's gonna look like, for insurance purposes and just like for like, I'm assuming there is a point where that's being submitted, if we can always include that in the updates. Wondering if that's possible.
You mean if the art has changed, like since the last time we saw it and before it's actually constructed?
Well, usually we don't really see what, if we don't pay a stipend and we get a draft, right? We don't really see what the final piece will look like. So my question is like, at what point do we know how it finally looks like, right? Without the stipend, like just in the normal process, and can we be, can we get an update on that once that is final, that we will get to see that?
So as it stands, right, so I'd like to respond to that because it's an interesting comment. So what ends up happening once the VAC approves an art piece, it goes to city council, but basically the submittal that the artist provided gets to be an attachment to the artist contract. So we don't actually see a modified schematic of the art piece. It is an attachment to the agreement. So there is no additional SketchUp, if you will, of a finalized piece. So basically, once it leaves the committee's hands and goes to city council, that doesn't change. And then once council blesses it, we use what they blessed, which is what you saw. And that gets attached to the agreement. So there is no other iterative process. So what you kind of see is what you get at that point in time.
Yeah, so
It's not like an in-between of here's the final thing that they showed us. We approved it, council approved it. And between that and the time the art is actually completed, there's not like some other update.
That's correct.
What I've seen is that what's submitted to us and what we finally see installed may differ.
Yeah, a little bit.
And hence there's no checkpoint along the way. I guess it was
Yeah.
Susie's comment along the way, just for us to check in to see, are we going to get what we actually thought we were going to get, or is it radically different or not?
Yeah.
I guess that's a process question, which I think Susie's bringing up, is that we should have a checkpoint along the way.
I'm wondering if
okay?
we can
Yeah,
have
just
that checkpoint. Yeah.
Just
I
to see
guess,
that
are we
we're-
okay seeing something but not being able to give input, right? Because I guess
I think we'd have to.
yeah,
Well,
I just want to be, because if it's just like the single entry, right? And we're asking for, and based on the process that John just laid out, if we're asking to see something, maybe they can send us, and we have gotten updates, right? We've gotten updates when the pieces are in the studio and they're being
work in progress.
fabricated. Yeah. And so we've gotten some of those, but I think I would just be cautious based on the process I just heard. Like, there's no room for input in that process. So I mean, so that's, again, my question is, are we okay seeing the work, right? But not being able to change it or modify it in any way?
But I like to bring up though issues that, in the pieces that went into Pyramid Park, I had expected certain colors on the mobile, which when I saw the piece wasn't there. So I was surprised. And then that may have been my lack of knowledge, but somewhere there's a disconnect in my mind with what I thought I approved and what I saw. So is there a process for us to be able to say, hey, this is what we're going to get actually, what the priest is going to create? And is this, like when I'm creating art for a commission, I check in with my client to say, hey, this is what I've created. Is this kind of the direction that you thought it was going to go into? And that's a checkpoint along the way to see that we're still in sync.
So
that's what I kind of heard from what I thought was missing. I thought that's what Susie was bringing up as well, as kind of a checkpoint along the way. Are we on the path to get what we thought we were going to get, or have things veered off? And is there hence a way to kind of bring it back closer to what we thought we were going to get? Which wouldn't be additional cost, but it would just be meeting the expectations that have been set.
So I think one way to potentially approach this, maybe in the actual boilerplate contract language, which requires, say, a quarterly, like a quarter, a half, a 3/4 check-in of either as not to make it overly cumbersome, but to say whenever the fabrication is at a quarter, provide documentation to the city on this. When it's at a half, it's this. And I don't know that we could necessarily augment all that much, but at least it would be a way to garner a check-in, kind of force a check-in that staff could then come back to the committee and say, here is piece, here is said piece for said project at, frame it as this project is doing this. This was the color palette. Here's what it looks like at this stage. Here's what it looks like at this stage. And maybe that's a way to do it through the contractual process. But as far as the actual schematic that gets attached, it's what you've approved. So if we're approving schematics, I think the other piece that's going to be really important is hopefully that schematic says it's 6 feet. These are the color palettes to, I think, your point, Cliff, that it's a blue, green, purple, and these colors. And so from a contractual obligation, we're able to track it. And if it's not in line with the contract, that's when you can actually change it. But to make sure that schematic, whatever it is that the committee approves, has that very well represented on that schematic, because it gets put as an attachment. So that's basically what we're getting. And it's clear, it's 6 feet, it's this set of colors, et cetera, et cetera. So that is maybe some of the process we can improve. So we're not completely retooling kind of this template agreement, but that it's very clear on the attachments, scale, size, color, all that. And then we can do those check-ins to say a quarter, half,
Yeah.
3/4.
I think that circle back to the list earlier, I was saying, the checklist.
There, I
Now-
agree.
Now that it's attached to the contract.
Yeah, I mean, once again, the checklist, we can certainly do the checklist approach, but just making sure that, I think the concerns that are raised are you getting what you thought you were getting? So really, it's the schematic is what binds that agreement together. So we need to make sure the schematic, once it leaves the VAC and goes to council, has that detail, is what I'm clearly hearing from the committee. And then as part of that process, we could have some check-ins along the way that are built in as a contractual obligation.
Yeah, honestly, I would only want to make that contractual obligation an additional burden of giving us the work in progress pictures for the bigger projects. That just my point of view. I don't know how other people feel about that. If it's a small project, I don't know.
Can I ask again, maybe that provides more clarity, John, for our most recent project for the maintenance buildings, like what we approved is 2 artists. We don't know what they're gonna paint, right? And we don't know exactly which areas they're gonna pick. And if they're gonna fill the whole area, we have both buildings have like 1 or 2 or 3 areas that they could pick from. So what you're saying is with those maintenance buildings, what we're still gonna get is a clear idea of what they pick, but like, are they gonna fill all 3 areas, or they're just gonna pick the big one? Maybe roughly what the design's gonna be. Is that still to come? You know, or do we stop at this point? I think I need to get more clarity. Like before we have this discussion about thresholds, and because I agree with all of it, but I think I'm still not clear completely, because at what point do we even know what the final design is?
Mhm.
And then, yeah, do we need those checkpoints along the way during the production? So for the maintenance buildings, we still gonna get a more final design or not?
Yes, so I need to solve the insurance requirements as it relates to the contractual process. So that's one, but that doesn't mean the contractual process is done. So, but need to solve for the insurance. Then once that's done and knowing we have a contract that will be able to move forward, we need to come back to the committee with a design concept that the artist heard from both the youth advisory and the senior advisory committee for this committee to basically look at. And, you know, I don't know that it's intended to completely start this process over. So hopefully the comments are in line or kind of in agreement with the vision of what was produced. But whatever that SketchUp looks like or is envisioned would be attached to the agreement and then signed and executed.
Mhm.
And that's what gets delivered. So it says the mural is this big and this is the concept art on it.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
what I'm saying is like, we need to make sure we always see that as well. I think that is yeah, that is an important.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to recognize that project is kind of an outlier. It was really experimental and different from our normal process because we got those other committees involved. So maybe that's why we feel like we have a little less information at this point. And most of the time we don't do things that way. So I just want to be careful that we don't end up micromanaging the artists and trying to get them to change small details too much after we've already approved their final proposal and chosen them. And recognize that, sorry, I'll get to you in a second, Cliff, but we should recognize that the proposal, the final proposal, or the rough draft, or whatever we choose, it's never going to be exactly the same as the final product. It's not going to be a photorealistic imitation of what we get. It's going to change. It's a rough draft. It's a proposal, and we should expect some changes in the final product. But go ahead, Cliff.
But yeah, I just don't want to be thoroughly surprised by
Yeah.
the end result. Well, I was thoroughly surprised both in a good, happy way with Mora Park, because I thought she did a great job. And Pyramid Park, I was surprised in a negative way. It wasn't as great as I thought it was going to be. And that those checkpoints would help either set my expectation or give feedback to the artist in the process of, hey, are you going with where I thought you were going to be going? So if we were able to build in checkpoints, to me that would be great. That would address setting my expectations. So I'm not surprised.
That's it. I'm always comforted and happy to receive those work in progress pictures when we've been providing them so far. And that's been entirely voluntary. So yeah, maybe we do say this is a requirement going forward.
Yeah, we just need this happy middle, right? Where we don't interfere too much, but we still can weigh in if something goes wrong. And that we roughly know what the artist's gonna do. So I think we just need
Makes
to
sense.
follow that, yeah.
Okay. Any final comments? Okay. We've already taken public comments, so we can move on to the next item. If that's okay.
Okay, yeah, good discussion. And let's see what's next. It might take me a second to find it. Did I close the thing? Okay, 7.2, right? We skipped around a little bit, but I believe we're getting back on track, getting to 7.2, Center for the Performing Arts Call for Artists. Update on the status regarding the call for artists for the Center for the Performing Arts 2023 gallery display. Next steps on jurying.
Yes, so very quick verbal update. So we've had a call for artists out since October. On this coming Saturday, that call will close. Currently, we have 29 submissions. So starting Sunday, you will be receiving some emails from CAFE to start to jury those submissions. My hope is that between now and the December meeting, I'm hoping the VAC committee can spend some time before the December, I believe it's 13th meeting, if I remember correctly, reviewing those so we can at the next VAC meeting decide on the artist proposals. Once again, this is for the art that would be displayed for approximately a month and a half to 2 months at the CPA through 2023. So currently there's 29 submissions. It closes on Saturday, and then Sunday we open up the jury. So this is to give you a heads up. At least 29 submissions will be reviewed by you. I will start to notice the VAC immediately once that closes, and would ask if you can take some time to review those and hopefully provide feedback before the December 13th meeting so we can bring forward the top submissions, and the committee can decide whom to move forward with as far as art displays in the CPA for 2023. So that's a quick update on that process. Happy to answer any questions.
Uh, I
in the
have
pa-
a,
yeah, in the
sorry,
pa-
John, I have a question from an artist. If it's okay to submit older work, does it need to be never to be seen work or fairly new
No,
work, or can
well,
it
that's
be
fine.
20 years old?
We've never had that requirement. It's just, yeah.
It doesn't need to be.
It doesn't have to be something they just painted. It can be fresh work. If they want to paint something new for us, great. If it's old work, that's fine too.
Okay.
And
We're
I
just
believe,
looking at high quality.
committee member Cycles has been very quiet, but I think had something to say.
yeah, in the past, how many artists are we looking to exhibit there? Is there like a
So typically for the year, it's at least 5 with 2 alternatives. So we're typically looking between 5 and 8. But based upon the move in, the move out, the display time of approximately a month and a half, it ends up being about 5 artists with 2 alternates or 3 alternates. But always happy to take more, because as we've seen this last year, or at least you haven't seen, I've seen, we've had a few artists that have had to back out. So we've had to rely on the alternates. So we are looking for between 5 and 8, ideally, to select.
And does it have to be one artist at a time? Or can we say, hey, these folks kind of work together, though they don't know it. Can we have an exhibition where we're having 2 people or 3 people at a time? Is that an option, or is it always one at a time?
From a contractual standpoint, it needs to be one at a time. I love the idea, but if you want your staff member to lose more hair, having multiple members at a time would not be ideal. So one at a time.
Okay, maybe we could do a little group show 2 at a time when we get more staff or something. Because that's an interesting idea, where I think some artists may find themselves not applying to this because there's so much wall space to fill and they don't have enough paintings. And that could be a real problem, especially for more amateur or beginner artists. So, but yeah, I understand it for now. John wants to keep it to 1. That's how we've always done it. Oh man, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, how long is left to apply, John? And how would an artist go about applying if they don't know?
Well, there are basically 3 days and a couple hours left to apply. So it closes this Saturday, basically at midnight. To apply, they can apply through Cafe. It's a very well-known artist, a call for artists solution. If they can't find it by just doing a internet search, they can certainly reach out to me, john.lang@mountainview.gov. I'm happy to forward them the direct link for them to submit directly in to our call for artists.
In the future, do you mind also just sending that link to us when the call goes out? Yeah, because I think,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think I send them out, and yeah, so that'll help.
I will forward this call out after this meeting to all the VAC. So thank you for the reminder.
Thank you.
Because the number of applicants right now seems a little low for 3 days to the deadline. And normally I think we have 50, 60 applicants. I would like to choose from a bigger number.
Relative to last year, the call
just
was
more.
I do.
The 2019 call, which was the last call that was done, had 41 respondents. So it was not quite a lot. In prior years, the calls had generated significant. The last call that was done was in 2019 for 2020, and it had 41 artists.
I guess I'm thinking of the golden days, but yeah, it's when you have more artists submitting, I think you just end up with the better end result. We have more choices. So let's.
There's still time for us to broadcast it through our channel.
Yeah, I'm going to advertise it definitely. Okay, so then let's see. Have any other comments from committee members? on this item. Any comments from the public?
So members from the public, would you like to speak on this topic or ask questions on this topic? I am not seeing any hands at this point in time.
Okay, then let's see what is next for us. Item 8, comments. Sorry, committee staff comments, questions, committee reports. No action will be taken on any questions raised by the committee at this time. This is just general comments and questions.
Your staff doesn't have any comments or questions, so I certainly defer to the committee for any comments or questions.
I have one question, and it would be helpful to know what the protocol is when general public reaches out to us directly with questions or comments or wanting to understand the inner workings of the Visual Arts Committee. So I think, yeah, if that's documented somewhere or if that's a future agenda item, but I think that would just be helpful to know, you know, what communication can and cannot happen.
Yeah, and John's working on that. He's made some inquiries, but
Cool,
I
thanks.
have a inquiry into the clerk's office on this matter, and once it's made clear to me what the boundaries are, I will communicate that to the VAC.
yeah, because we've gotten a couple in the last month or two, and we've gotten emails from Naya and other people, and I would love to be able to help them and get involved with their projects. And I'm like, I don't know if we can legally. So hang in there, anyone who's asked us questions, and John will give us the answers on how we can or cannot participate or help. Okay. Then,
I mean, don't come here.
all right, if there's no questions, comments from the public,
I'll sit here, fine.
we'll go on to adjournment. Item 9, it's 7:40, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good
Ciao.
night.
Enjoy your vacation. Enjoy Tahoe.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.